Hey everybody, it's KaijaFit from YouTube. I'm doing a video solely on my disability and how it affects my everyday life and how I exercise and adapt to it. Basically, just my whole athletic adventure and how I adapted. So, my story is basically what makes me unique. My adventure with overcoming the paralysis and overcoming what happened to me and turning it into something positive is what makes my story unique. But everybody is unique. Everybody has their own story, regardless of how uninteresting they believe themselves to be. I totally thought I was probably the most uninteresting person in the world, despite everyone telling me I needed to make a YouTube channel. I needed to dedicate an Instagram to my story. I needed to write New York bestsellers, a memoir, a biography. I needed to do all these things because they thought my life was so compelling. And I really didn't think that. I don't know if it was because I was self-conscious about my disability. I don't know if it was because I'm not the type of person that typically puts that kind of stuff out there. I don't know. But I finally decided to do that after dozens of people have told me how motivating, my story is for them. So in the previous video I did, which would be the first video on my channel, I mentioned that I've been paralyzed for around 7 years. I've been in a wheelchair for about 6.5 out of those 7 years, and I'm paralyzed completely from the knees down and officially at the L3, L4 level of my lumbar spine, which is my lower back. So the 3 and the 4 are the 3rd and the 4th vertebrae of the lumbar area. So you have your cervical vertebrae, which is your neck. You have your thoracic vertebrae, which is like your chest. Your lumbar, which is your lower back, and your sacral, which is like your tailbone area. I have what doctors refer to as incomplete paralysis, which essentially means that it's an incomplete injury to the spinal cord nerves. So there's still some nerve conduction in my spinal cord and signal between my brain and my legs. My injury is due to transverse myelitis. Transverse myelitis is a demyelinating disease of the central nervous system. In my case, the spine. It can happen in the brain, but it can really happen anywhere in the spine. So it can happen as high up as your first and second level of your cervical spine, or anywhere really. It affects about 1,400 people a year, and basically they split it in thirds. So a third of the people with transverse myelitis fully recover and have no symptoms if it's caught early enough. A third of people have a mild disability, maybe a limp or a loss of feeling in a certain area, but for the most part they're functional. And then the last third, in my case, are the people who have severe or permanent lasting effects from the bout of transverse myelitis. So basically, transverse myelitis is incurable. It can reoccur, but it's very rare, and it's unbiased as to what populations it can affect. So it affects men and women equally, all age groups, and all races. There's no one group over another that it affects more. So my specific symptoms for my case of transverse myelitis are not like any other person's transverse myelitis. We are very unique in each case. For instance, in my quadriceps, I have no light touch sensation. So if you were to just simply like glide your fingers across my quads, I can't feel that at all. But if you were to squeeze, I can feel that. I also have the ability to feel pain in my quads, and occasionally, very occasionally, I can feel some heat, but for the most part, from about the middle of my stomach down, I cannot feel temperature changes at all. I do not feel warmth at all. So I can get into a hot tub and not feel anything until it goes above where I was injured. Below my knees, I have no light touch sensation, no deep touch sensation, and barely any pain sensation. And one of the weird things about my case of transverse myelitis is that I always feel cold. My legs feel like they're encased in ice blocks, and even to the touch, they're cold. And that's mostly due to circulation problems that most people with some sort of paralysis, they have that problem. So circulation's a big problem with people with paralysis. So another thing is I actually have the strength in my quads of an able-bodied person, but I'm totally paralyzed from the knees down. I have no muscular control whatsoever. I can't lift my foot up. I can't push it down. I can't move it to the side or to the inside. So my flippers are floppers. But I'm a really good swimmer. So since I can kick my knees, my flippers are actually really useful in that situation. I also have really weak hamstrings. And to push my hips out, I'm pretty strong, but to pull them in, so to push my leg out, I'm strong, but to pull it in, I'm weaker. I'm able to walk with the use of bilateral ankle foot orthotics, which are hard leg braces, and in my previous video I put up a photo of what those look like. And basically they're a rigid, thick plastic brace that is custom made according to my anatomy. Basically you go into a prosthetics and orthotics office and they cast your leg with like a plaster cast, and then they take that cast and they cut it off your leg, and then they tape it together. They fill it with a mold of some sort, or they make a mold out of it by filling it with, like, I think it's plaster or something, but correct me if I'm wrong, I really don't know. And then they take the plastic sheeting that they use for these braces, they drape it over that mold, and they use a heat gun or some source of heat to mold it to your anatomy. And that's how they make them. And these pieces of plastic actually allow me to stand and walk decently, but not fantastic. So the problem I have with these braces is that they really limit what I can do. I can stand, I can walk, but I can't do anything that requires high intensity because they are very rigid. I have no ankle flexibility in these at all. They stop at a 90-degree angle, so when I take a step, it's like if you were to wear 2 ankle casts and try to walk in them like a normal person. You'll feel that jolt every time you take a step because you're not moving your ankle. Now I have no control over my ankles, so I have to have that. So I'm actually getting a pair of braces that are a little more high tech. And I put a picture in my last video and described them a little bit. They are modeled after prosthetic running blades, and they're a little more flexible. They'll have interchangeable struts, which will allow me to change the flexibility of the brace depending on what activity I'm doing. So if I'm just walking, I'll probably have them pretty rigid. And if I'm running, I'll probably make them a little less rigid so that my flow of movement is a little more rhythmic instead of like that stopping motion. So, when I'm doing my exercises, there are certain exercises that are a little more difficult for me. Anything that requires putting weight over my toes, like, say I'm doing a squat where you need to bring your knees over your toes, that's very difficult for me because I can't bend my ankles. So if you think about a squat, you're bending your knees, your ankles, your hips, and you're trying to keep that nice alignment. And I have a difficult time doing that because my ankles physically do not bend. So it's incredibly hard for me to do a squat. So I have to do modified squats, which you can see in this video. And I hold on to a post, and then I kind of lean back on my heels and I do the squat that way. And I do the same thing with lunges and any other activity requiring me to put weight over my toes. I also cannot jump. I have a really hard time. Well, I cannot jump in these braces. It's not possible. Without ankle flexibility or something to replace ankle flexibility, it's virtually impossible. Currently I can't run. I have tried, but I can't. And when I do deadlifts, I actually need a heel lift to keep me more on my toes. So I put 10 plates under my heels, and I have to stand a lot wider than the average person just so I can keep my balance. I can do stiff leg deadlifts pretty easily, actually. But it's the deadlifts that require putting weight over my toes that are difficult. Also, rope climbs. Rope climbs are hard because I can't use my feet to hook on. So I actually cross my legs and put the rope like up more towards my groin, and I hold the rope, and I use my arms for the most part. So doing a rope climb is mostly just arm strength, and then I use my legs to clamp onto the rope to keep me from sliding back down. One of the perks of not being able to feel my legs and sometimes using a wheelchair and being partially paralyzed, leg day doesn't hurt. I can crank out deadlifts and squats and leg presses until literally I cannot push the machine anymore. So leg day is awesome, and nobody questions me when I leave in a wheelchair. So that's a perk. My body weight is really reduced because I have very, very small lower legs because of muscle atrophy. I don't have the ability to build muscle below the knees, so my legs are actually pretty light. So doing things like L sits, L hangs, and L like dips in an L hang position or an L sit position, planches, they're super easy because my legs weigh next to nothing. My shoes actually probably weigh more than my legs. So if you see me doing an exercise in a wheelchair one day, and then standing the next day, and then in a wheelchair the next day, it's probably because my legs decided not to cooperate. They do that. Occasionally they decide they don't want to cooperate. So I usually take my wheelchair to the gym with me just in case, because I never really know if I'm going to be able to continue on foot, especially if I'm doing a lot of leg exercises. Because, you know, even though I have decently strong quads, I can walk, I can stand. Occasionally I have spasms, which the best way I can explain them to an able-bodied person would be like calf cramps, but like tenfold. And add paralysis to that mix, they just don't want to move. So I do take my wheelchair to the gym with me just in case. Some other conditions that I manage currently are epilepsy and a small brain tumor. And they're relatively under control, and I did so with exercise and nutrition. I've managed to get these conditions, for the most part, under control just by eating right. I don't really eat processed foods. Actually, I don't eat processed foods. I don't eat sugar. I don't drink anything other than water and tea, which is unsweetened. And I really, if it has too many ingredients, typically I don't eat it. And that's how I've managed these conditions. I do take medicine for them, but I only take 2 medications. And a lot of people with epilepsy, I mean, they take a bag full of medication. So it really all depends if you're willing to put in the work or not. I just really wish vegetables could cure paralysis, then I'd be set, because I eat a lot of veggies. So I'm also like a super firm believer in positive thinking equals positive outcome. I believe that the more excuses you generate for yourself, the worse off you'll be. And I think that everybody should find a challenge and challenge themselves every day. Find a thing. Try to achieve that thing. Try to become that thing. Once you've achieved the thing, the person you want to be, find another thing. I've also learned that fitness isn't necessarily a fling. You can't just be fit one day and not be fit the next day, and then decide next month you're going to be a fit freak again. It's not a fling. It is 100% a lifestyle. Once you adopt fitness into your life, you live and you breathe fitness. But it's really rewarding. Without this, I wouldn't be walking. I wouldn't have the potential to run. I wouldn't be cycling. I wouldn't be healthy. But I put a lot of work into this. It's a lot of hard work. I have done so much to get to this point. Even in just the last 6 months, I go to the gym 6 out of 7 days a week. And even on my rest day, I'm not resting. I'm doing yoga, I'm stretching, I'm swimming. Now that I've seen what I can do just by making myself go work out, I can't stop. And if I can change my life this much, if I can cure some of my conditions, if I can walk again, if I can run again, if I can change my life for the better, then you can do anything. All right. I think that's probably it for me today. I apologize for being so vague on my conditions in the last video. I realized that that's something I should have touched on, but being in this position for so many years, it's not something I put a lot of focus on. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. Other than that, have a nice day. Jazzy out.